Welcome to Something About Sleep. We hope you'll let our stories guide you to a nice, peaceful slumber as you learn about history and what it was like to be a human in times long since past. Now, I need to get to sleep, and if you're watching this video, chances are you do too. So, without further ado, take it away.
Thank you, sir. On tonight's episode, we'll explore a day in an Ottoman coffeehouse. So join me here by the fire and rest your weary eyes as I tell you a tale from long, long ago. If you listen closely, there is a small mystery hidden inside an ordinary cup of coffee. Not the kind of mystery that begins with a secret door or a lost treasure or a dramatic event from a chronicle. This one is quieter than that. It rests at the bottom of a little cup where the dark grounds settle after the last sip. It lives in the pause between two voices, in the warmth of a copper pot, in the way a room can fill with people and yet leave each person alone with his own thoughts. Tonight, we're going to step gently into that kind of mystery. We're going to spend a day in an Ottoman coffeehouse, somewhere in Istanbul, in a period when the city was full of water, stone, wood, smoke, footsteps, prayers, trades, languages, and long conversations. We will not follow a battle or the life of a sultan. We will not hurry through a list of dates. Instead, we will follow a smaller path, through one room and the streets around it, from dawn until night, noticing how history sometimes survives in ordinary routines. Before we begin, if you're listening while resting, working, travelling, or trying to fall asleep, feel free to leave a gentle comment with where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It is always a lovely thought, imagining this quiet story reaching people in different places, under different windows in different hours of the night. And if you enjoy calm history told slowly, you're welcome to like the video, subscribe, and return whenever you need a peaceful place to listen. There is another reason this ordinary room deserves our patience. A coffee house gathers the kinds of evidence that rarely survive completely in archives. Pauses, expressions, seating habits, favourite corners, tones of voice, and the feeling of a day changing from blue morning to lamplit night. Historians can study records, travellers' accounts, legal discussions, literature, paintings, and later memories, but no document can preserve every small breath in a room. So this narration moves carefully between what is historically grounded and what must be gently imagined. The coffee, the public sociability, the storytelling, the games, the masculine character of many such spaces, and the importance of Istanbul's urban rhythms are all drawn from patterns historians recognise. The particular keeper, the particular traveller, the quiet man in the corner, and the exact sequence of this day are imaginative guides, here to help us walk through the past without pretending we can recover every detail with certainty. That uncertainty does not make the past weaker. It makes it more human. We approach the coffee house the way a listener approaches a half-heard conversation from another room, with curiosity, humility, and a willingness to let the missing parts remain soft around the edges. Now let us imagine the city before the first cup is poured. The sky over Istanbul is still pale and unfinished. The roofs are dark shapes. The water is a broad, breathing surface. Somewhere below the hill, in the direction of the harbour, a rope knocks softly against a wooden post. A gull cries once, then disappears into the blue-grey morning. A cat steps along a wall as if the city belongs to her, which, in the earliest part of the day, perhaps it does. The streets are not empty, but they are not awake in the full sense. A baker has already lit his oven. A water carrier has shifted the weight of his load. A shopkeeper lifts a bar from the inside of a wooden shutter. A man crosses a lane with a bundle under his arm, moving carefully over stones still damp from the night. The air holds the coolness of water and the faint smell of smoke from household fires. In this hour, the great city does not feel grand. It feels intimate. The domes are not yet bright. The minarets are only outlines. The markets have not opened their full voices. The palace is far away, not only in distance but in mood. Here, in the lanes nearer the warehouses and small shops, the day begins with tasks that are humble, repeated, and necessary. And among the doors waiting to open is the door of a coffee house. It's not a large room, at least not in the way we might imagine a grand public hall. It is a place one might pass without noticing if one did not know it. A wooden front, a threshold rubbed smooth by many feet, a small sign perhaps, a shutter that can be lifted, a low interior where cushions, benches, cups, trays and talk will soon gather. It is a room made for staying, but not for sleeping, for listening, but not for silence, for being in public without always needing to speak. By following one coffee house through one day, we're also following a habit that changed the rhythm of many Ottoman cities. Coffee had travelled before it became part of this room. It had moved through lands and ports, through Yemen and the Red Sea world, through Cairo and the cities of Syria, into the wider Ottoman realm. By the 16th century, coffee drinking was becoming a familiar part of urban life in places such as Istanbul, though its exact beginnings in the city are described differently by different sources. Later Ottoman accounts often connect early Istanbul coffee houses with the Tahtakale district, near commerce, warehouses, and waterfront movement. Those accounts mention merchants from Syria, and they place the opening of early coffee houses around the middle of the 16th century. Whether every detail is exact or shaped by memory, the wider story is clear enough. Coffee houses became part of the city's social life, and once they appeared, they were difficult to forget. But for now, before the day becomes history, the coffee house is only a room waiting for its keeper. The first light comes slowly, as if it is feeling its way through the city. Istanbul wakes in layers. It wakes first along the water, where men who live by boats read the morning through wind and current. It wakes in the bakeries, where the work began while most doors were still closed. It wakes in small courtyards, where women move quietly through household tasks and children turn under blankets. It wakes in the mosque courtyards, where stone holds the coolness of night, and at fountains where water falls with the same patient sound it made yesterday and the day before. From a high place, the city might seem like a pattern of domes, roofs, walls and lanes. But from the level of the street it is more like a series of small encounters. A wooden door, a worn step, a cloth awning still tied up, a hand reaching to unlock a shop, the smell of bread, the low sound of someone clearing his throat in the early cold, the little scrape of a basket dragged closer to a threshold. The Ottoman capital was not one simple thing. It was imperial and local at the same time. It held courtly ceremony, trade, scholarship, worship, military presence, household routines and neighbourhood loyalties. It was a city of Muslims, Christians, Jews, migrants, officials, artisans, slaves, freed people, visitors and families whose lives were shaped by language, work, faith and community. A person could walk only a short distance and feel that the city had changed its voice. Near the docks, the talk might carry the sound of cargo and travel. Near a market, the day might be measured by price, weight and reputation. Near a religious complex, the movement of people might follow prayer, study, charity, and the steady flow of water from public fountains. Coffee houses belonged to this layered world. They were not separate from the city. They were woven into it. A coffee house near a busy market did not feel the same as a quieter one in a neighbourhood lane. A place frequented by artisans had a different rhythm from one known for storytellers, soldiers, scholars, or travellers. Some were modest rooms where regulars knew one another by habit. Others became more elaborate, associated with music, public recitation, games, or groups of men with shared interests. To say an Ottoman coffee house is already to simplify. It is better to imagine a family of places related by coffee and conversation, but different in mood, clientele, location, and time. Our coffee house stands in a district that receives the morning early. Not far away, goods pass through warehouses. Men cross from the waterfront carrying bundles, messages, baskets, or nothing at all but news. The streets nearby are narrow enough for voices to bounce softly between walls. Wooden upper stories lean toward one another in places, casting shade even when the day is bright. At corners, small fountains or public water sources gather brief pauses, because water in a city is never only water. It is a place to wait, to rinse, to greet, to notice who is awake. At dawn, the coffee house is still closed. The shutter is down. Its interior is dark, but the room already belongs to the coming day. Inside, benches wait along the wall. The cushions hold the faint impression of yesterday's bodies. Cups are stacked or set aside. A board for games may rest near one corner. A few wooden stools are turned in a way that suggests they were moved quickly the night before. There may be a smell in the room even before the fire is lit. Old smoke, coffee, wood, dust, wool, and the faint human trace that gathers wherever people sit for many hours. Outside, a man passes carrying bread. Another pauses, looks toward the closed front and continues. He knows it will open soon enough. No need to knock. The coffee house is part of his day, but not the first part. First there is work, or prayer, or a small errand, or the walk through streets still half empty. The city's sounds begin to separate. At first they are only a low murmur, but then each sound becomes itself. A cartwheel, a donkey's hoof, a metal latch, a voice calling from inside a shop, a broom over stone, the water below always moving, always taking some part of the city away while bringing something else toward it. The dawn light reaches the front of the coffee house. It catches the edge of the shutter, touches the worn wood, and then brightens the dust in the air. If a person were standing there with nothing to do but watch, he might see that the building has absorbed many years of small gestures. The place where hands lift the shutter is darker from touch. The threshold is smooth at the centre. A low mark on the wall shows where a tray may have leaned too many times. The coffee house is a public place, but it has the memory of a household object, used so often that it no longer needs to announce itself. The keeper arrives without ceremony. He may be middle-aged, though in this light age is difficult to tell. His clothing is practical. His steps are quiet but not slow. He has opened this room many times before, perhaps for years. He carries keys, or a cloth bundle, or a small account book tucked somewhere safe. He pauses at the door, not because he is moved by the significance of his work, but because everyone who opens a place in the morning pauses for a moment. He listens. He checks the street. He lifts the latch. Wood shifts. The shutter rises. Morning enters the coffee house. For a moment the room is simply revealed. Nothing dramatic happens. No one applauds the return of daylight. The keeper steps in, and the dust of yesterday becomes visible. The cushions look tired in the pale light. The hearth or brazier waits. The cups wait. The room has the stillness of a place that has held too many voices to be truly empty. The keeper leaves the door open. He lets the air move. He may sweep. He may adjust the seating. He may set water to one side, count cups, check the coffee, and prepare the little instruments of the day. His work is not hurried, because hurry ruins small rituals. The day will bring enough demands. For now he has the rare privilege of owning the silence before other men arrive to borrow it. Outside, Istanbul continues to wake, but inside the coffee house, the morning has become a preparation. Before coffee was an Ottoman habit, it was a traveller. It moved across landscapes slowly, not as a single event, but as a growing practice carried by trade, conversation, religious life, curiosity, and taste. Its deeper origins lie in the highland world of northeast Africa and the coffee-growing regions associated especially with Yemen in the early history of coffee as a drink. By the time it entered Ottoman urban life, coffee already had a story behind it. One of roasted beans, ground powder, heated water, gatherings, debate, and sometimes suspicion. For a sleep story, it is tempting to imagine coffee arriving like a character at the gate of Istanbul, carrying its own destiny. But history is rarely so neat. Coffee did not simply appear one morning and change everything by evening. People tasted it, discussed it, praised it, worried about it, banned it in some contexts, defended it in others, and gradually made room for it in daily life. It became a drink, then a habit, then a social institution, and eventually part of memory. In earlier centuries, coffee was associated in parts of the Islamic world with wakefulness. Some traditions connect its use with devotional contexts, especially the desire to remain alert during long nights of prayer or study. The details are complex and not every story can be treated as literal fact, but the association between coffee and wakeful attention was important. Coffee did not intoxicate in the manner of wine, yet it altered the experience of time. It helped people remain awake, it sharpened conversation, it made a late hour feel usable. And when a drink changes the way people gather, it becomes more than a drink. From Yemen and the Red Sea trade, coffee moved through important cities such as Cairo and Damascus. These were not distant names to the Ottoman world. They were connected by commerce, pilgrimage routes, administration, scholarship, and migration. Goods, habits, books, people, and ideas travelled along overlapping paths. A merchant could carry beans, a scholar could carry an opinion, a traveller could carry a taste, a story could carry the reputation of a new drink before the drink itself became common. By the 16th century, coffee drinking had entered Ottoman life in a way that drew both enthusiasm and concern. Some people admired its usefulness, its sociability, and its refinement. Others worried about the places where it was consumed, the talk it encouraged, the time it seemed to take from work, or the gatherings it created outside older forms of oversight. Coffee, in other words, arrived not only as a flavour but as a question. What kind of gathering was proper? What kind of wakefulness was useful? What happened when men from different walks of life sat together in a room for no purpose, as simple as prayer, work, or family duty? The early coffeehouses of Istanbul are often placed by later Ottoman writers in the area of Tahtakale, a commercial district near the Golden Horn, close to trade and the movement of people. Later accounts speak of Syrian merchants, sometimes named in slightly different ways, who opened one of the first known coffee houses there around the middle of the 16th century. Historians handle such accounts with care, because later memories can become polished with repetition. Still, the association makes sense. A district tied to trade, storage, port traffic and mixed urban life would be a natural place for a new social habit to take root. At first, a coffee house may have felt novel. Men entered to taste a drink that was still associated with travel, with other cities, with learned or fashionable circles. But novelty, if repeated often enough, becomes routine. A cup becomes expected. A room becomes familiar. A place where one once went out of curiosity becomes a place where one is known. And so coffee entered the daily map of the city. One of the most distinctive things about Ottoman coffee was the method of preparation. The beans were roasted, ground very fine, and boiled with water in a small pot, often made of copper or brass, known in later usage as a sezve or e-brick, depending on language and region. The drink was poured into a small cup, with the grounds left to settle at the bottom. It was not filtered in the way many modern listeners might imagine. It was thick with presence. The last sip approached the dark sediment below, where the drink became almost unreadable, except to those who made a playful art of reading grounds. This method shaped the experience. A A small cup does not invite gulping. It asks for attention. It can be held, warmed in the hand, paused over, returned to. The grounds make the drink slow. One waits for them to settle. One learns not to hurry the bottom of the cup. Coffee teaches patience even while it encourages wakefulness. In the Ottoman world, coffee also came to be associated with hospitality and social grace. It could be served in homes, used in ceremonies, offered to guests and remembered in songs, proverbs, stories and customs. But the coffee house gave it a special public form. In a household, coffee could express welcome. In a coffee house, it could create a temporary society. That society was not perfectly equal. Ottoman life, like all historical societies, was shaped by status, wealth, gender, religion, office, age, and reputation. Many coffee houses were male spaces. The regulars in one room might not be welcomed in another. Some places were rougher, some quieter, some more literary, some tied to trades or military groups, some watched by authorities, some ignored. We should not imagine every coffee house as a gentle ideal. Yet for the ordinary purposes of our story, it is enough to say that coffee houses gave many men a place to sit outside the home and outside work, to hear news, exchange stories, rest, argue, laugh, and be seen. The drink became a reason to linger. Lingering became a social form. The social form became part of the city. By the time our imagined coffee house opens its door, coffee no longer needs to introduce itself. It has become one of those habits that feels older than it is. A young apprentice may think of it simply as something grown men drink. An old regular may remember a time when the room looked different, when a former keeper stood behind the hearth, when the cups were fewer, when a friend now gone sat near the door. For each patron, coffee carries a different measure of time. The keeper does not speak this history aloud as he prepares the morning. He may not think of Yemen, Cairo, Damascus, Tahtakale, legal debates, trade routes, or chroniclers. He thinks instead of the fire, the water, the quality of the grounds, the first guest, the accounts, the weather, the mood of the street. That is often how history works. The large pattern settles into small tasks. Soon, the first cup will be made. But before anyone drinks, the room itself must be brought to life. The keeper begins with the floor. A broom moves from the back of the room toward the open front, gathering dust, ash, thread, crumbs, and whatever small signs the previous day left behind. There is something comforting in the sound of sweeping at morning. It is neither speech nor silence. It tells the room that people will come again. It tells yesterday that it has had its time. The coffee house is low and warm in its proportions. Along the walls are places to sit, benches, cushions, perhaps mats spread in the more comfortable corners. A few simple stools stand near the centre. There may be hooks or shelves for objects needed through the day. Near the place of preparation is the heart of the room, the fire, brazier, hearth, or heated surface where the water will meet the coffee. The exact arrangement would vary from place to place and from century to century, but every coffee house needed a practical centre, a place where heat, water, grounds, cups and hands could work together. The keeper shakes out a cushion. He turns another so the worn place is less obvious. He sets small cups where he can reach them. The cups may be ceramic, perhaps with holders if the period and setting allow for them, perhaps plain, perhaps chipped at the rim. Nothing here needs to be perfect. A coffee house is not made beautiful by perfection, but by use. The beauty of the room is in repetition. The same cup passed to the same kind of hand, the same greeting heard every morning, the same patch of sunlight crossing the floor. He checks the coffee. The grounds are dark and fine. If the beans were roasted nearby, their scent may still hold a hint of smoke. In some places, coffee was roasted or pounded in connection with the coffee house itself. producing a rhythmic sound that could announce the presence of the drink before anyone entered. In our room, perhaps the coffee has already been prepared in sufficient quantity for the morning, kept carefully away from dampness and careless hands. The keeper knows by touch and smell whether it is right. He checks the water. Coffee depends on water more than some drinkers admit. In a city like Istanbul, water came through a world of fountains, conduits, carriers, cisterns, and household arrangements. A cup of coffee contains not only the bean, but the city's management of water, the labour of those who carry it, and the infrastructure that makes it available. None of this is visible when the cup is served. But without water, the room would remain only a room. He stirs the coals. A small glow answers him. He adds fuel. The fire does not blaze, it returns. This is enough. Coffee wants careful heat. Too much haste changes the foam, the scent, the taste. The keeper may not describe his work in such precise terms, but his hands know it. Hands are often better historians of craft than written records. They remember the angle of pouring, the distance from flame, the moment when the surface begins to tremble. A narrow beam of sunlight moves across the wall. It catches the smoke-darkened surface above the hearth, where years of preparation have left a shadow. The wall itself has been seasoned by coffee. It has absorbed mornings, arguments, jokes, waiting, fatigue, and the breath of men who came to sit for an hour and left some invisible part of themselves behind. The keeper steps outside for a moment. The street is brighter now. A neighbour nods. A boy passes quickly, perhaps on an errand he would rather not be doing. Two men speak near a shop front in low tones. A donkey shifts under its load. Above the street, windows begin to open. The day is no longer fragile. When the keeper returns inside, he changes the room again by standing in his place. Every public room has an invisible order. People learn where to sit, whom to greet first, how long to pause at the threshold, whether to remove dust from their clothing before entering, where not to put a foot, which corner belongs to older regulars, where a newcomer may sit without seeming too bold. These customs may not be written, but they are felt. The keeper understands them because he watches them every day. A coffeehouse keeper was not only a seller of coffee, he was the guardian of atmosphere. He had to know when to speak and when to pretend not to hear. He had to remember who owed money, who preferred a stronger cup, who was grieving, who was likely to start an argument, who needed to be welcomed because his presence brought good custom, and who should be handled with caution. In a busy coffee-house, the keeper's work was part craft, part account-keeping, part diplomacy, part endurance. Our keeper arranges the trays. A tray is more than a tool. It allows several cups to move through a room without disturbing the flow of conversation. It makes service graceful. It creates a small ceremony even when the business is ordinary. A cup set directly into a hand is one thing. A cup arriving on a tray, balanced among others, is another. It tells the drinker he is part of a wider order. The first guest has not yet entered, but the room is no longer asleep. The fire is warm, the cups are ready, the threshold is open, the coffee-house has become expectant. A man appears in the doorway. He's not the most important person who will enter today. He may not be important in any public sense at all. But he matters, because he is first. His arrival changes the room from preparation to use. He pauses at the entrance, as men often do when stepping from street into interior. His eyes adjust. He greets the keeper. The keeper answers with the ease of a repeated phrase. Perhaps the man is a regular whose name needs no announcement. Perhaps he works nearby and has only a short time before his day becomes crowded. Perhaps he's older and wakes early whether he wishes to or not. He sits in the place he usually sits, or in the place available to him. He rubs his hands together. He says something about the morning. The keeper replies. No one says anything memorable. Most mornings do not begin with memorable words. and yet the first small exchange matters. A coffee house is built from such exchanges. The day begins not with a proclamation, but with recognition. The keeper turns to the fire. The first cup can now be made. The preparation of coffee is one of the slowest moments in the room, even when the keeper is skilled enough to do it quickly. Water goes into the small pot. Coffee follows, dark and fine, with a texture closer to powder than to the coarse grounds familiar in many modern kitchens. Depending on habit, taste and setting, sugar might be added before boiling, or not at all. The details of sweetness could carry meaning. Some liked coffee bitter. Some preferred it softened. Some orders required memory, and the keeper's memory was part of his trade. The pot is placed near the heat. At first, nothing happens that the eye can easily see. Then the surface begins to change. The grounds darken the water. A smell rises, faint at first, then fuller. The room receives it before the guest does. Coffee announces itself by scent before taste, and its scent is one reason it became attached to memory. A person can forget the exact words spoken in a room and still remember how the room smelled. The keeper watches. He does not leave the pot unattended. Coffee can rise suddenly. Foam gathers. The liquid thickens with movement. The edge of the pot glows in the light from the fire. Copper, if copper it is, has a way of looking alive near flame, taking on the colours of morning and heat at once. There is a moment when the coffee seems about to escape itself. That is the moment the maker must understand. The foam is precious. The drink should be brought to the edge of boiling without being allowed to become careless. In many Turkish coffee traditions, the foam on the surface is part of the pleasure and skill of service. It gives the cup a softness before the bitterness. It is the visible sign that the coffee has been handled attentively. The first cup is poured. Because the grounds remain in the drink, the pouring is gentle. The cup is small. It may sit on a saucer. It may be served with water. In some settings, a sweet might accompany it, though details vary with period, household, class, and custom. The important thing is not to over-decorate the moment. A first cup in a working coffee house need not be luxurious. Its luxury is warmth, attention, and the permission to pause. The guest receives it. He waits. The grounds must settle. The heat must soften. He holds the cup near his mouth but does not drink immediately. This is the first lesson of the coffee house. Not everything is improved by beginning at once. A modern listener may be used to coffee as a drink of movement, carried down a street, taken into an office, swallowed between tasks. But in this room, coffee is not only fuel. It belongs to sitting. It belongs to the hand resting on the knee, the eyes turning toward the doorway, the small breath before speech. Even if coffee helped people remain awake, the coffee house was not necessarily a place of speed. It was a place where wakefulness could become social. The guest takes a sip. The taste is strong, perhaps bitter, perhaps sweetened. It is not thin. It has body. It brings warmth to the tongue, the throat, the chest. The man lowers the cup and looks at it as people sometimes do with a drink that has met them correctly. He may say nothing. Silence in the first minutes of morning is not unfriendly. Another man enters, and then another. The second greeting is livelier because the room is already inhabited. The first guest turns his head. The keeper repeats the motions: water, coffee, heat, pour, serve. Soon there are 2 cups, then 3. The coffee house begins to produce its own climate. Outside, the morning is cool and bright. Inside, warmth gathers near the fire, in the cups, in the breath of the first patrons. Coffee has a social rhythm unlike a full meal. A meal organizes bodies around food, appetite, and duration. Coffee organizes attention. It gives people something to hold while they speak, something to look into when they do not wish to answer, something to finish when they are ready to leave. It can begin a conversation or rescue one from awkwardness. It can mark hospitality without requiring abundance. It can make a brief stop feel complete. The first cup also belongs to the economy of the room. The guest will pay, either now or later. Some patrons may keep small accounts, some may be trusted, some may not. The keeper must balance generosity with survival. Coffeehouses were businesses, and the romance of the room should not hide the fact that rent, fuel, coffee, cups, repairs and water all cost something. A coffeehouse that could not sustain itself could not remain a place of memory. Still, the transaction is softened by habit. The regular does not feel he is merely buying liquid. He's buying his place in the morning. He's buying the right to sit for a while, to hear what others have heard, to be greeted, to be part of the room's slow unfolding. As more cups are prepared, the scent deepens. It catches in fabric. It moves into the street. A passerby may not intend to stop, but the smell of coffee has always been a persuasive thing. It suggests wakefulness without urgency. It suggests company without obligation. It suggests that somewhere nearby men have found a reason to sit. In some coffee traditions, the grounds left in the cup became part of playful fortune-telling, especially in domestic and social contexts. One could turn the cup, let the sediment trace patterns, and imagine shapes in the dark residue. Such practices should not be forced into every setting, but the idea suits the mystery of coffee. A drink that leaves marks behind seems to invite interpretation. At the bottom of the cup, a mountain, a road, a bird, a face, a meeting, a delay. Whether believed or not, the grounds become a small theatre of possibility. In our coffee house, the first guest does not read his cup. He drinks slowly. He listens to the room becoming itself. He hears the keeper preparing another pot. He hears a stool dragged lightly over the floor. He hears the street outside grow busier. He hears a word from the harbour, another from the market, a half laugh, the rustle of clothing. The first cup is finished. The grounds remain. The day has begun. Before more patrons arrive, it is worth lingering for a while with the objects of the coffee house. A room is not only made of walls, it is made of things that hands return to again and again. In a coffee house, every object has a small social life. The cup is lifted, lowered, passed, rinsed, chipped, replaced. The tray moves through the room like a quiet messenger. The brazier holds heat at the centre of attention. The cushion receives tired bodies without asking what kind of day they have had. The game board waits for afternoon rivalry. The lamp waits for evening. Even the broom, used before most guests arrive, has its part in making the room hospitable. The small cup may be the most intimate object in the coffee house. It sits close to the mouth, warms the fingers, and carries the strong dark drink in a portion small enough to be finished slowly. Because the coffee is unfiltered, the cup also contains the remains of preparation. Grounds gather at the bottom. The drinker must learn the cup's depth. One does not treat it as if it were clear water. The cup teaches caution. It teaches attention. Some cups may be plain. Some may be more decorated, depending on the means of the keeper and the habits of the patrons. Ceramic, porcelain, metal holders, saucers, and regional styles could all appear in different settings and periods. It is best not to imagine every coffee house as elegant. Many were practical rooms serving practical men, yet even a plain cup can become beautiful through repeated use. The rim knows the lips of many people. The handle, if it has one, knows the particular grip of many fingers. The cup is small enough to disappear in a hand and important enough to organize an hour. Then there is the tray. A tray allows the keeper to serve several men at once without making service feel clumsy. It turns carrying into presentation. Cups arranged together on a tray seem briefly equal, though the men who receive them may not be equal at all. The tray glides, pauses, lowers, rises. It enters conversations without interrupting them. A man may stop speaking long enough to take his cup, then continue as if the coffee has become part of the sentence. The pot is different. It belongs more to the maker than to the guest. The small coffee pot, heated carefully, is an instrument of timing. The guest sees the result. The keeper knows the risk. Too much heat, too much hurry, too little attention, and the coffee loses its grace. The pot requires the maker to remain present. It is difficult to make good coffee while thinking entirely of something else. The brazier or hearth holds the room's practical warmth. In colder months, men may sit a little nearer to it than they admit. Heat draws bodies the way conversation draws attention. In summer, the same fire is necessary but less welcome, and the keeper's work becomes hotter, heavier, and less romantic. Historical atmosphere should allow for discomfort. A coffee house could be warm in a pleasant way, but it could also be smoky, crowded, and tiring. Still, the fire remains the heart of preparation. Without it, the room cannot become itself. The seating shapes relationships. A bench along the wall encourages men to sit side by side, looking inward or toward the door. Cushions invite a more settled posture. Stools can be moved, making small circles of conversation possible. The place where a man sits may show age, status, habit, friendship, or boldness. A newcomer who sits in the wrong place may learn quickly that space has memory. The door is also an object, though we may forget it. It controls the room's relation to the street. Open, it invites air, customers, noise, and chance. Closed, it gives the coffee house privacy, warmth, and separation. A door in such a place is never merely architectural. It is the boundary between passing and belonging. To pause at the door is to decide whether one wishes to be seen entering. On a shelf there may be cups waiting upside down, a cloth folded for wiping trays, a container of coffee, perhaps sugar, perhaps tools for the fire. There might be hooks for hanging garments or objects, a place for pipes in later periods, or a corner where the game board rests. The walls may hold little decoration, or perhaps pictures, calligraphy, objects associated with the keeper's taste, or traces of performances past. In some coffee houses, visual culture could be lively. In others, the walls were plain and smoke-stained. Both kinds of rooms belong to history. The lamps wait until evening, but they are already part of the day. A lamp in daylight seems asleep. At night it becomes a sun small enough to fit inside a room. It creates faces from shadow. It shortens the world to the distance its light can reach. Before modern lighting, the decision to light a room was also a decision to extend wakefulness. Lamps cost fuel. They required care. They made evening sociability possible, but not effortless. Even the dust has meaning. Dust gathers where people return. It settles from clothing, streets, wood, ash, fabric, and time. The keeper removes it each morning, but never completely. A spotless coffee house would feel less like a coffee house than a display. The room needs traces of use. The trick is to keep it clean enough for welcome, and worn enough for memory. As the morning grows, these objects will become less visible. People notice things less when they work properly. The cup will be only a cup, the tray only a tray, the cushion only a place to sit. But for a moment, before the room fills, we can see how many quiet helpers history requires. The past is not made only of people. It is made of the things people touched, carried, broke, mended and used until the shape of daily life passed into them. The first cup has been served. The objects are awake now, and soon more men will arrive to fill the room with voices. By mid-morning, the coffee house has several centres of attention. Near the doorway sits a man who likes to see the street. He may be a small merchant, or someone who once worked with goods, and now carries more memory than merchandise. He watches who passes, who hesitates, who enters, who pretends not to look inside. In a city, the doorway is a kind of text. It can be read by those who have nothing better to do and by those whose business depends on noticing. Along one wall, two artisans talk in low voices. Their hands give them away before their words do. One has fingers stained from dye, ink, metal, leather, or wood. The other keeps touching his thumb to a callus, as if testing whether the body has changed overnight. Ottoman urban life depended on craft and trade. Bakers, tailors, boatmen, porters, scribes, barbers, metal workers, sellers of cloth, makers of shoes, sellers of fruit, and many more. Some belonged to guild-like organisations or professional networks. Some inherited trades. Some learned as apprentices. Some lived with uncertainty, rising early and ending the day with only a little more security than they began it. A coffeehouse gave such men a place to rest their bodies without leaving the public world entirely. The artisan did not have to invite someone home. The porter did not have to stand in the street. The apprentice could sit near older men and learn not only words but posture, how to hold a cup, how to answer a joke, when to speak, when to let silence do the work of respect. A young man enters with the careful self-consciousness of someone not yet fully at ease in adult company. He is perhaps an apprentice sent on an errand, or the son of a shopkeeper, or a helper in a nearby store. He orders coffee, or perhaps someone orders for him. He tries not to look too pleased. The older men see this and are amused, but kindly. Many coffee houses were masculine spaces, and for young men entering them could mark a step toward public adulthood. Not every young person was welcome in every place, and social boundaries mattered, but the coffee house could function as a school of public manners. A porter comes in with shoulders that seem to have remembered the weight even after the load is gone. He sits heavily, but not carelessly. The keeper may bring his cup without asking. In some rooms, regulars were known by their preferred strength, sweetness, and timing. To be known in this way is a small comfort. It means the world has not completely overlooked you. A scribe or literate man may sit farther back, carrying a paper or folded note. Literacy in the Ottoman world varied by class, occupation, education, and community. But public reading and the circulation of written materials were important parts of urban culture. A coffee house could bring together those who read and those who listened. A letter, a poem, a notice, a story, or a bit of news might be read aloud. The spoken word remained central, but writing had its own power. In a room where not every man read easily, the reader became a temporary bridge between paper and public knowledge. Then there is the quiet man in the corner. Every coffee house has such a figure, or at least it is easy to imagine one. He's not unfriendly. He answers when addressed, but he has come less to speak than to sit near the sound of others. Perhaps his household is crowded. Perhaps it is too empty. Perhaps he is between tasks, between fortunes, between moods. A coffee house can be a refuge not because it is silent, but because its noise asks little of him. He can belong without explaining himself. This is one of the gentle truths of public rooms. People often go there not because they have something important to say, but because they wish to be held within ordinary life. The murmur of others reassures them that the world continues. Cups are poured, dice roll. Someone complains about prices. Someone laughs too loudly. Someone tells the same story again. The quiet man sits among it all, neither lost nor found, just present. The morning conversation remains practical. Weather, work, the condition of a road, a shipment expected, a craftsman who didn't deliver on time, a marriage arrangement, the price of wood, the mood of an official, a rumour about repairs near a fountain, a question about whether a certain boat has arrived. These are not grand subjects, but they are the fibres of daily life. A traveller enters, perhaps from another district or from farther away. His clothing carries dust from the street. He may speak with a different accent. Istanbul was a city where movement was constant. sailors, merchants, pilgrims, provincial visitors, soldiers, messengers, scholars, and labourers passed through. Not every coffee house would welcome every stranger in the same way, but the presence of travellers helped make such rooms into points of exchange. A man with a fresh story did not need to be famous to become useful. The traveller orders coffee and sits where there is space. The regulars observe him with a kind of polite curiosity. In a city, one learns to notice without staring. His cup arrives. He warms his fingers around it. Someone asks where he has come from. He answers briefly. The room adjusts. A new voice has entered the day. The keeper moves through all of this with practiced attention. He listens enough to serve well, and not so much that he becomes trapped in every conversation. His work requires movement, but he is also the fixed point of the room. Patrons come and go. The keeper remains. A few men leave. Others arrive. The morning is not a crowd all at once, but a tide. Each entrance changes the balance slightly. A loud man makes the room larger. A respected elder makes it more careful. A stranger makes it more alert. A storyteller, if he appears, gives the room a future event to anticipate. A man known for debt makes the keeper thoughtful. A man known for generosity makes him relax. The coffee house is becoming a map of relationships. It is tempting to imagine Ottoman coffee houses as places where all ranks met freely and equally, but that would be too simple. Social boundaries mattered. Reputation mattered. Religion, class, occupation, and neighbourhood mattered. Some rooms were associated with particular groups. Some men would feel at ease in one coffee house and out of place in another. Yet within these limits, the coffee house could bring different lives near one another. A man might hear a conversation he would not have heard at home. An apprentice might absorb the opinions of elders. A merchant might gather information from a porter. A literate patron might read to men who could not read the text themselves. A storyteller might speak to all of them at once. The room's early warmth has become a social warmth. Not sentimental, not always gentle, but real. The sound of the street enters through the door, and the sound of the coffee house escapes into the street. Inside and outside are not separate. The room breathes with the city, and as the morning opens, the coffee house becomes what it was made to be, a place between places. The coffee house was not home. That was part of its importance. A home in Ottoman Istanbul could be full of family, obligation, hospitality, privacy, labour, hierarchy, and intimacy. It was shaped by gender, age, kinship, servants or dependents in some households, and the rhythms of cooking, washing, prayer, sleep, and conversation. For many people, home was crowded. For others, it was a place of responsibility. For some, perhaps, it was the place where they were most known and least able to choose their role. The coffee house offered another kind of room. It was not the mosque, though it existed in a city shaped by religious time and sometimes stood near religious buildings. It was not the market, though men carried market talk into it constantly. It was not the bathhouse, though both bathhouses and coffee houses were important social spaces outside the home. It was not a workshop, though artisans might gather there. It was not a school, though listeners could learn. It was not a court, though disputes might be discussed. It was not a theatre, though performances could occur. It was something in between. This in-between quality gave the coffee house its quiet power. A man could go there without a formal invitation. He could remain for a while without needing to host anyone. He could meet people without receiving them into his private household. He could listen without committing himself to action. He could be visible, but not exposed in the same way as in the street. He could be among others and still keep parts of himself hidden. Historians often discuss coffee houses as public spaces, but public does not mean simple. The public life of an Ottoman coffee house was layered with custom, hierarchy, surveillance at times, moral concern at times, and ordinary friendship much of the time. Some coffee houses were criticised by officials or moralists, especially when they were seen as places of idle talk, subversive conversation, or disorder. Some were associated with military groups, literary circles, religious communities, or neighbourhood networks. Some may have been lively to the point of unruly. Others were routine, respectable, and ordinary. Our coffee house, for the purposes of this gentle day, is ordinary but not dull. It is a room where a man can rest between errands. It is a place where news arrives before paper does. It is a place where a young person learns adult speech by hearing it performed. It is a place where a story can be repeated until it belongs to everyone. It is a place where loneliness can sit near company. That last point matters. A crowded room does not erase loneliness. Sometimes it reveals it softly. A man who lives alone may come because the walls of his own room are too quiet. Another may come because his household is too loud. A traveller may come because he has no household in the city at all. A worker may come because his body needs to stop moving but his mind does not wish to be alone. A widower, a young apprentice, an older regular, a man with debts, a man waiting for news from a relative, a man who simply likes the smell of coffee. All can sit under the same roof without needing the same reason. The coffee house gives them a shared surface. The cup, the bench, the game board, the story, the weather, the price of grain, the joke about a man everyone knows. These topics are modest, but modest topics make social life possible. Not every conversation can begin with the soul. In this sense, the coffee house can be understood as a room of partial belonging. Patrons belong while they are there, but they are not consumed by the place. They can leave. They can return tomorrow. Their place may be remembered but not owned. A corner may feel like theirs, but only because others allow it to remain so. The keeper sees these patterns. He knows which men sit together and which avoid one another. He knows when a newcomer has chosen the wrong place, and whether it is worth correcting. He knows that a certain old man grows talkative after the second cup, that another becomes quiet when a traveller mentions a town he once knew, that a third always asks for news and then disbelieves it. He knows who listens to stories with his eyes closed, and who pretends not to care while missing nothing. In the late morning, the coffee house settles into its social shape. Men have chosen their places. The first rush has passed. The fire is steady. The keeper's hands are stained with the work of pouring. Light has shifted from the threshold toward the centre of the room. The street outside is fully awake, but inside time feels slower. This slower time is important. Coffee houses allowed people to linger. In many societies, the ability to linger in public is not distributed evenly. Wealthy people may have private rooms, gardens, reception halls, servants, and leisure. Poorer and middling people often need shared places where leisure can be purchased cheaply, borrowed socially, or justified as part of daily life. A cup of coffee could open time. It didn't remove hardship, but it gave shape to a pause. The pause might last only a few minutes. It might stretch across hours. A man might say he is going only for one cup and remain through 2 games and a story. Another might come to meet someone and end up listening to news from the harbour. A third might sit because rain has begun. Ordinary reasons accumulated until the coffee house became necessary. There is no need to romanticize it too much. The room could be smoky, the benches could be hard, arguments could happen. Not every joke was kind. Not every patron was welcome everywhere. But history becomes more honest when it allows places to be mixed. The coffee house could be warm and exclusionary, lively and tedious, hospitable and watchful, ordinary and significant, all within the same day. Near noon, a shaft of light touches the game board. Someone laughs at a remark from the doorway. A cup is set down too hard, and the keeper glances over. A man near the back asks whether anyone has heard the latest from the docks. The room turns slightly, not all at once, but enough. The coffee house is ready for news. By the time the sun has climbed higher, The coffee house begins to feel the pressure of noon. Noon is not only a point on the day's path, it is a change in the body. Morning energy has thinned. The freshness of the first errands has worn away. The city is awake now in every direction, and because it is fully awake, it is also more tiring. Heat gathers in stone. Dust rises more easily. Voices in the market grow sharper. A man who spoke brightly at dawn may answer more shortly now. Even the coffee house, with all its warmth and talk, must adjust to the heavier middle of the day. Some patrons leave for prayer, work, or meals. Others arrive because noon has released them from morning obligations. In Ottoman cities, the times of prayer gave structure to the day, though people's movements varied depending on work, distance, season, and circumstance. The call to prayer moving across the city does not stop every task in the same way, but it changes the air. It reminds the room that time belongs to more than trade and conversation. A man near the door rises, smooths his clothing, and steps out. Another finishes his cup before following. The keeper does not need to ask where they're going. The city's rhythms are understood. For a while the room grows thinner, the quieter men remain. A traveller, unsure of the local pattern, watches and learns. The coffee house at noon can feel suspended. It is neither the lively morning nor the glowing evening. It is a bridge between them. The keeper uses the lull to clean cups, prepare more coffee, check supplies, and perhaps take a small bite of food when no one is demanding his hands. His workday does not divide cleanly into public and private time. He eats when the room allows him to eat. He rests in fragments. Outside, household life has its own noon. Meals are prepared or finished. Children are called indoors or sent on errands. Water is carried. In shaded rooms and courtyards, domestic coffee may be prepared in contexts very different from the male public coffee house. Women's social life in Ottoman households could include visiting, conversation, ceremonies, and hospitality, in which coffee played an important role. We should not let the coffee house stand for the whole culture of coffee. It is one public form, important and visible, but not the only one. This distinction helps keep the history balanced. The coffee house is central to our story because we're spending the day there. But beyond its door are other rooms with other customs. A cup served in a household might carry different meanings: welcome, respect, kinship, celebration, negotiation, or ritual. In some later traditions, coffee could be associated with courtship customs, family visits, and ceremonies of hospitality. The public coffee house and the private cup belong to the same broad world of taste and sociability, but they did not feel the same. Inside the coffee house, the remaining patrons speak more slowly. Noon discourages intensity. The man who was loud in the morning has gone to attend to business. The apprentice has disappeared, perhaps reluctantly. The traveller sits with his second cup, letting the city's unfamiliar names arrange themselves in his mind. The quiet man has not moved much. He seems to have accepted noon as one accepts shade. The light is bright outside, but softened inside. It enters at an angle, touches dust in the air, and leaves the deeper corners dim. The room is cooler near the walls and warmer near the fire. A fly circles a cup and is waved away. Someone complains mildly about the heat. Someone else says it is not heat yet, only a warning of heat. This leads to a brief exchange about summers past, each remembered as worse than the last. Memory, like weather, often becomes larger with age. A man returns from outside with a little news, but no one has the energy to make much of it. The news can wait. Not everything needs to become conversation immediately. The coffee house has room for information to rest before it is used. The keeper may step to the doorway and look out. He sees the street in its noon brightness, the hard edges of shadows, the slower movement of people conserving effort. A cart stands briefly in the way and is cursed without enthusiasm. A seller calls out, but the call is shorter than it was in the morning. Even commerce seems to wipe its brow. Then, gradually, the noon interruption passes. Men return. A few new patrons appear. The room regains its texture. Prayer, work, food, heat, and errands have rearranged the city and sent different people back into the coffee house. The day is not simply continuing, it is beginning again in another key. This is one of the pleasures of following a whole day. Places change without changing location. The same bench at dawn, noon, and night belongs to 3 different moods. The same cup served in the morning and evening carries different meanings. The same doorway frames different kinds of light. As noon softens into afternoon, the coffee house becomes ready once more for longer conversation. Words begin moving again. News enters a coffee house the way wind enters a lane, unevenly from more than one direction. A porter brings one version from the quay. A shopkeeper brings another from the market. A man who's been near a mosque courtyard has heard something else. A traveller carries a story that began 2 days ago outside the city and has already changed as it passed from mouth to mouth. A literate patron may unfold a paper or letter. A clerk may know something of an office. A sailor may know something of weather. A merchant may know something of delay. Everyone knows a little. No one knows everything. In a world before modern mass communication, information travelled through bodies. It walked, rode, sailed, waited, forgot, exaggerated, corrected itself, and arrived late. The spoken word mattered deeply. Markets, mosques, bathhouses, workshops, public squares and coffee houses were all part of the circulation of knowledge. A city was not informed all at once. It became informed gradually, through overlapping networks of trust and habit. The coffee house was well suited to this movement because people were already sitting. A room of seated listeners is an invitation for a story to lengthen. A man with news can enter, order coffee, and be asked the question he was hoping someone would ask. He can begin modestly, as if he has no wish to attract attention. Then, as faces turn toward him, he can give the detail that proves he knows more than others. This morning's news is not dramatic. For a sleep narration, it does not need to be. Perhaps a ship expected yesterday has arrived after all, but with part of its cargo delayed. Perhaps a road is muddy beyond a certain point. Perhaps a respected craftsman is ill. Perhaps a wedding feast in another neighbourhood was more elaborate than expected. Perhaps the price of coffee itself has risen, which produces a groan from the keeper and laughter from those who do not have to buy it in quantity. A man near the wall says he heard the opposite. Another asks where he heard it. The answer matters. In a city of voices, source and reputation are everything. Did the news come from a man who saw the ship, a man whose cousin works near the harbour, a man who invents half of what he says, or a man who never speaks unless he is sure? The coffee house is not only a place of rumour, it is a place where rumour is tested socially. Someone corrects a name, someone adds a detail, someone tells a related story from years ago. The room drifts from information into memory, then back again. That is one of the natural movements of conversation. News rarely remains pure. It attracts comparison, complaint, humour, and advice. The keeper listens while pouring. He must listen. News affects business. If rain is coming, men may stay longer. If ships arrive, travellers may appear. If coffee prices rise, he must adjust accounts. If a certain patron is in trouble, he must decide whether to extend credit or avoid it. The room is social, but it is also practical. Information helps everyone navigate the day. At times in Ottoman history, authorities worried about coffee houses precisely because talk gathered there. A room where many men exchange news can become more than a leisure space. It can become a place where opinions form, complaints circulate, jokes sharpen, loyalties are tested, and public feeling becomes audible. In some periods, coffee houses attracted official attention and some were monitored or restricted. But for most of the men in our quiet room, the talk is not conspiracy. It is the ordinary desire to know what is happening. This distinction matters. A coffee house could be politically significant without every cup being political. It could be watched by authorities and still be, for its regulars, mostly a place of work talk, family talk, market talk, jokes, games, and stories. We do history a disservice if we flatten every room into one purpose. The same bench can hold a tired worker at noon, a storyteller at dusk, and a heated argument after nightfall. The movement of words changes the atmosphere. A man who is sleepy becomes alert. Another leans in. The young apprentice hears names he does not yet understand and stores them for later. The quiet man in the corner lifts his eyes only once at a detail that touches his past. The traveller corrects a pronunciation. The keeper pretends not to hear the remark that might become troublesome. A cup is poured. The surface trembles. The conversation moves on. Someone mentions a coffee house in another district, larger and noisier, where a certain performer drew a crowd the previous evening. Someone else says he prefers a smaller room, where a man can hear his own thoughts. This leads to a comparison of coffee houses, which is another form of urban knowledge. Men speak of rooms as if they are personalities. One is too smoky. One is full of boastful men. One has good coffee but poor seating. One attracts poets. One is known for games. One is watched too closely. One has a keeper who waters the coffee, a serious accusation offered with the solemnity of a legal complaint. Laughter moves through the room. Then, as often happens, the talk softens. News has done its work. Men know a little more, or believe they do. The urgency fades. Cups are lifted. Someone asks for another. A patron near the door has to leave and says he will return if the afternoon allows. Another man takes his place almost immediately, as if the room dislikes an empty seat. The city outside is now bright and busy. The coffee house holds a portion of that brightness, but filtered through smoke, shade, and the slow handling of cups. Words have travelled into the room, changed shape, and settled among the men like coffee grounds at the bottom of a cup. Soon, speech will give way to another kind of attention. The game board is brought forward. A game begins with a sound, the click of pieces, the hollow knock of dice, the small adjustment of a board placed on a low table. These sounds do not demand attention from the whole room, but they invite it. Even men who are not playing may glance over, judge the opening moves, and pretend not to care. Backgammon, in forms related to older games of tables, had long been familiar across the region. Chess, too, carried a deep history in Islamic and Ottoman lands, associated with strategy, patience, wit, and the art of seeing beyond the immediate move. In coffee houses, games gave shape to waiting. They allowed competition without real danger, conversation without direct confrontation, silence without awkwardness. Two men sit opposite one another. One is older and claims not to mind whether he wins. This is almost certainly untrue. The other smiles as if he believes him. A third man watches and offers advice that neither player asked for. A fourth insists the advice is wrong. The keeper, passing with a tray, knows from experience that the game will last longer because of the spectators than because of the players. Dice move, pieces shift, coffee is sipped. A man delays his move while staring at the board with theatrical seriousness. Another accuses him of trying to age the pieces by looking at them. Laughter rises, then fades. Games in such a room are not merely games. They are performances of temperament. A man reveals himself in how he loses, how he boasts, how he accepts luck, how he blames luck, how he listens to advice, how he ignores it, how he pretends not to be pleased by victory. The young apprentice learns as much from watching the men as from watching the board. He sees who can tease without wounding, who cannot be teased, who respects elders, who flatters them, who hides impatience, who turns every small contest into a matter of honour. The coffee house at this hour becomes pleasantly suspended. The strongest movement of the morning has passed. Afternoon has not yet gathered its later arrivals. Work continues outside, but inside there is a pocket of time in which the board seems to matter more than the street. The players lean forward, the watchers settle back. The quiet man in the corner closes his eyes, not sleeping exactly, but resting in the room's sound. In some Ottoman coffeehouses, tobacco would also become part of the atmosphere after its introduction and spread in the early modern period. Smoke, pipes, embers, and the slow gestures of smoking appear in many accounts and images of later coffeehouse life. For our purposes, it is enough to let a little smoke drift near the ceiling without making it the centre of the scene. The room already has its haze from fire, lamps later in the day, bodies, and breath. The game continues. The older player makes a move that looks careless, then reveals itself as a trap. The watcher who gave bad advice pretends he meant something else. The younger opponent laughs but studies the board with fresh caution. A good coffeehouse game is slow enough to hold a circle and light enough that men can enter and leave the attention around it. Not everyone plays. Some men prefer to watch because watching carries less risk. Others prefer to talk. A few might count prayer beads, turn a ring on a finger, adjust a sash, or stare toward the open door. Passing time is an art, though people rarely call it that. In a room without clocks visible to everyone, time is measured by cups, light, calls to prayer, arrivals, departures, and the changing tone of the street. The keeper notices the angle of the sun. He knows when the room will thin and when it will fill again. He knows which regulars come only after a certain hour. He knows whether the day's mood is generous or tense. Today it is gentle. The men are talkative but not sharp. The coffee has been praised twice and criticised once by a man who criticises everything. This, the keeper understands, counts as praise. A game ends. The loser protests that one throw changed everything. The winner agrees solemnly, which makes the defeat worse. They begin again. Outside, the city turns through its middle hours. Goods are weighed, bread is sold, cloth is measured, children run where they should not. A messenger hurries. A woman at an upper window shakes out a cloth. A call rises from a cellar and is answered by another voice farther down the lane. Istanbul does not pause because men in a coffee house have paused. That is part of the pleasure. The city keeps moving around the room, and the room borrows a little stillness from the movement. The traveller who arrived earlier watches the game without understanding all the jokes. Sometimes it is not language that excludes a person, but shared memory. The men laugh at references that require years of neighbourhood life. He smiles politely. The quiet man notices this and, after a while, explains one of the jokes in a low voice. The traveller nods, grateful. The room has opened slightly to him. This is how belonging often begins, not with a welcome speech, but with a whispered explanation. Afternoon light grows warmer. The board's polished edges catch it. A cup sits forgotten until it cools. The keeper replaces it with another after a small exchange of coins. A man near the door says he must leave before he loses his entire reputation to dice. Someone replies that his reputation left before breakfast. More laughter. The coffee house at this moment is almost drowsy. Its energy has softened into repetition. Pour, sip, move, wait. Ask, answer, laugh, fall quiet. The same motions return, but each time they belong to a slightly different arrangement of men and light. Then a new figure appears at the doorway. The room does not become silent, but it notices. A storyteller is not always announced by costume or grand entrance. Sometimes he's simply a man whose voice people have learned to expect. He may be a professional medder, a public storyteller skilled in gesture, imitation, and timing. He may be a reciter of tales, a performer of humorous scenes, a man known for memory and invention. In some coffee houses, storytellers were central to the evening's pleasure. In others, they appeared occasionally, depending on the crowd, the district, and the period. Today, he has come early enough for anticipation to begin before performance. The game continues, but with less conviction. The players are now competing with a future story. Men shift. The keeper looks toward the storyteller and calculates, perhaps, whether the afternoon will become profitable. A story can hold a room longer than a game, and this room is ready to be held. The storyteller does not begin immediately. That is part of his skill. He sits first, he receives coffee. He greets those who must be greeted, ignores those who enjoy being ignored, answers a joke with a better one, and lets the room become aware of his presence. A story told too soon arrives before the listeners have made space for it. A good storyteller waits until the room has leaned toward him without realizing it. Ottoman coffeehouses were closely associated with oral culture. In many times and places, professional storytellers, known as medders, performed for gathered listeners. They could tell romances, adventures, moral tales, humorous episodes, legends, and story adapted from written and oral traditions. Their art depended not only on memory, but on voice, gesture, pacing, mimicry, and the ability to feel a room. A storyteller might shift from one character to another with a change in posture or tone. He might use a handkerchief, a stick, or a small prop. He might make the audience laugh, then lead them into reflection, then return them safely to laughter before the mood grew too heavy. Coffee houses were also associated in some contexts with poetry, music, public reading, and shadow plays such as karagoz and hasivat, though such entertainments varied by period, district, and audience. The world of performance was not separate from the world of coffee. Both depended on attention. Both improved when people lingered. In our coffee house, the storyteller is a man of practiced plainness. He does not need to appear grand. His authority is in the fact that men who are speaking now become quieter. The game board remains open, but the pieces are still. Someone near the back coughs once and then seems embarrassed by the sound. The keeper fills 2 cups and then steps more softly. The storyteller begins with a phrase that feels old even if he shaped it that morning. He speaks of a traveller who entered a city at dusk with a torn sandal, an empty purse, and a confidence much larger than his fortune. The traveller, he says, claimed he could recognise any man's trade by the way he drank coffee. A scribe, by the way, he held the cup away from ink-stained fingers. A porter, by the way, he warmed both hands around it. A merchant, by the way, he waited for someone else to praise the coffee first. A poet, by the way, he forgot to drink while searching for a phrase. A fool, by the way, he said the coffee was too bitter after asking for it without sugar. The room laughs because everyone can place himself elsewhere in the joke. The storyteller continues. The traveller in the tale enters a coffee house not unlike this one, though of course no one says so directly. He boasts of his talent. Men challenge him. He guesses correctly twice, incorrectly once, then invents an explanation so elaborate that the incorrect guess becomes, in his telling, a deeper form of correctness. The listeners laugh again. The story is not about the traveller's gift. It is about the human ability to protect pride with words. A good coffeehouse story can make the room recognise itself without feeling accused. The storyteller changes voices. The traveller becomes nasal and overconfident. The coffeehouse keeper in the story becomes dry and patient. A young apprentice becomes too eager. An old man becomes suspicious of everything. The real apprentice in our room looks down, smiling despite himself. The old regular near the door pretends not to notice the resemblance. Such performance worked because it was communal. The listeners were not passive in the modern sense. They murmured, laughed, interrupted, corrected, anticipated, and rewarded. A storyteller did not deliver a fixed object into silence. He shaped a living exchange. If the room was tired, he slowed. If the room was restless, he sharpened. If a joke landed well, he let it breathe. If a detail failed, he moved past it. The story belonged to him, and not to him at the same time. The tale grows gentler. The boastful traveller is asked to identify a man sitting alone in the corner. He studies the man's cup, his clothing, his hands, his silence. At last he says the man must be a judge, because he has allowed every foolish claim to pass without comment. The quiet man answers, in the story, that he is not a judge but a man waiting for a friend who is late, and at that the traveller is silenced, because there is no cleverness that improves waiting. The room grows softer. It is only a story, but stories have a way of touching places conversation avoids. Every listener knows waiting. Waiting for a person, waiting for payment, waiting for weather to change, waiting for a sun, a letter, a ship, a decision, a cure, an apology, an end to uncertainty. The coffee house itself is full of waiting disguised as leisure. Men wait between tasks. They wait for news. They wait for the next cup, the next throw, the next laugh, the next reason to leave. The storyteller senses the shift and does not make it too heavy. He brings the story back toward humour. The friend finally arrives, but he is late because he stopped at another coffee house, where he was delayed by a storyteller telling a tale about a man waiting for a friend. The room laughs, relieved. The circle is closed. The listener can rest. After the story ends, no one speaks for a breath or two. This silence is different from the silence before the performance. It is not emptiness. It is the room setting the story down. Then someone makes a remark. Someone else asks for the part about the merchant again. The storyteller repeats a line, improving it slightly. A cup is sent to him. A coin may follow, or the keeper may settle matters in another way. Performance depended on patronage, payment, generosity, and reputation. The storyteller must live as well as enchant. A poet in the room, or a man who wishes to be thought one, offers a couplet. It may be admired, teased, or ignored, depending on its quality and the poet's standing. Ottoman literary culture was rich, ranging from courtly divan poetry to popular verse, devotional writing, songs, and everyday wit. A coffee house was not a palace salon, but poetry didn't belong only to palaces. Lines could circulate by memory, be adapted, misquoted, improved, or made ridiculous in public speech. The storyteller listens with a half smile. He knows poets can be dangerous to a performer if allowed too much room. A poet wants the air still. A storyteller wants it moving. Yet both depend on the same invisible substance, attention. The afternoon lengthens. A man asks whether the storyteller knows a tale from a certain book. Another asks for a story he heard years ago and cannot remember properly. The storyteller says he knows it, though perhaps he knows only enough to invent the rest. This too is part of the art. Oral tradition is not a machine for copying. It is a way of carrying stories through changing rooms. He tells another shorter tale, this one of a barber who claimed to improve a man's wisdom by trimming his beard according to the shape of his thoughts. The story allows harmless imitation of vanity, learning, and bad advice. It gives the room laughter without cruelty. Even the barber, if one were present, might laugh, provided the storyteller was wise enough not to look at him. In the corner, the quiet man opens his eyes. He has not slept. He has travelled through the story without moving. The traveller from another district now feels less foreign, because laughter has given him a temporary citizenship in the room. The young apprentice has learned 3 new phrases he will use badly later. The keeper has sold more coffee than he would have without the performance. The story has changed the coffee house, not permanently. By tomorrow it will be another story, another crowd, another mood. But for this afternoon, the men in the room share a memory no one outside possesses in exactly the same way. They can refer to the boastful traveller later. They can repeat the line about waiting. They can use the joke to soften a difficult moment. The story has become a small tool. This is one reason coffeehouses mattered. They were places where shared references formed. A neighbourhood is not only streets and buildings, it is also the things people know together. The old joke, the famous quarrel, the good storyteller, the poor coffee in the next district, the man who always arrives late, the phrase that needs no explanation. Coffeehouses helped produce this common world. The storyteller finishes his second cup. He may stay into evening, or leave for another room where another set of men waits to be entertained. Before he goes, the keeper says something to him quietly, perhaps about payment, perhaps about returning, perhaps about a rumour that might be shaped into a story. The storyteller nods. When he steps outside, the room feels briefly larger and emptier. The performance is over, but the day is not. Someone returns to the game board. Someone repeats a line from the tale. Someone else says the storyteller was better last week. This is unfair but ordinary. The keeper collects cups, and the room settles back into its smaller sounds. A story has passed through, leaving warmth behind. If the coffee house has a memory, much of it lives in the keeper. He may not write it down. He may not think of it as memory, but he carries the room in practical fragments. Who came, who paid, who quarrelled, who made others laugh, who left early, who has not been seen for several days, which cup has a crack, which cushion needs mending, which supplier was late, which regular should not be served too strong a second cup. His day is made of details that others enjoy without noticing. The fire must be fed before it fades. Water must be ready before the pot is needed. Cups must be cleaned. Coffee must be measured. Coins must be counted. Credit must be remembered. The door must remain welcoming without letting the room lose its order. The keeper must be patient but not weak, friendly but not careless, attentive but not intrusive. A coffee house is a business, and business gives weight to every pleasant scene. Behind the warmth of the room are costs, beans, fuel, rent, repairs, utensils, perhaps taxes or fees, perhaps payments to workers or helpers, perhaps obligations to suppliers. Coffee did not appear magically in the pot. It passed through trade networks, merchants, porters, roasters, grinders and sellers. The cup in a patron's hand is the final visible point of a chain. The keeper knows the chain by its failures. When coffee is plentiful, patrons praise the taste and forget the root. When coffee is expensive or poor, everyone becomes a critic. If fuel is damp, the preparation suffers. If water is delayed, the room's rhythm breaks. If cups break faster than expected, the accounts tighten. If a regular cannot pay, the keeper must decide whether kindness today will become trouble tomorrow. He keeps small accounts, perhaps in writing, perhaps partly in memory. Ottoman urban life produced many kinds of records, from court documents and tax registers to private notes and commercial accounts. But a small coffeehouse's daily memory may have been informal, a name, a mark, a debt, a promise. Men who come often may be trusted differently from strangers. A man of good standing may delay payment without embarrassment. Another may be asked gently, then less gently. The keeper is also an interpreter of mood. After the storyteller leaves, he senses whether the room needs more coffee, more quiet, or more humour. When two men begin speaking too sharply, he may intervene indirectly, placing a cup, asking a question, making a joke, drawing one man into another conversation. Not every conflict can be avoided, but many can be softened before they become public. The room's reputation depends on such skill. A coffee house known for constant quarrels may attract some men and repel others. A room known for good stories may fill on certain evenings. A keeper known for fair dealing may keep regulars for years. a keeper known for watering the coffee, cheating accounts, or allowing disorder may lose the trust that makes the business more than a stall. Trust is invisible until it breaks. A patron near the wall asks for another cup and says he will pay later. The keeper pauses only half a moment. The pause is small enough that most men miss it, but the patron sees. He adds that he expects money after a job is finished. The keeper nods. The cup is prepared. Nothing more is said. This is not charity exactly, and not pure commerce. It is relationship. The coffeehouse's economy includes honour, habit, and face-saving. To shame a man publicly over a small debt might cost more than the debt. To ignore too many debts might ruin the business. The keeper must measure more than coins. In the late afternoon, he steps into the street and speaks briefly with a supplier or neighbouring shopkeeper. The city outside is louder now. The market has moved past its morning freshness into the heavier sounds of use. Voices are tired, animals are impatient. The sun warms the upper walls, and shadows gather lower down. A boy carries something wrapped in cloth. A woman passes at a distance with a basket, moving with purpose, not entering the male space of the coffeehouse, but fully part of the city that sustains it. Domestic coffee customs existed alongside public coffeehouse culture, and women in Ottoman society had their own social worlds, ceremonies, visits, and household practices involving coffee. Our room, though, remains mostly a male public room, one part of a much larger social fabric. The keeper returns inside. He adjusts the fire. He replaces a cup with a cleaner one. He wipes a tray with a cloth that has absorbed the smell of coffee so deeply it may never lose it. A young helper, if he has one, asks whether more water is needed. The keeper nods. The helper disappears and returns later, slightly out of breath, carrying the ordinary burden that makes other men's leisure possible. In historical rooms, visible comfort often rests on invisible labour. Someone sweeps, someone carries, someone washes, someone prepares, someone mends. The atmosphere that patrons remember as effortless is often the result of work repeated until it no longer draws attention. The keeper looks around the room. He sees the old regular by the door, the artisans by the wall, the traveller still listening more than speaking, the apprentice now bold enough to laugh aloud, the quiet man who may leave soon or may remain until night. He sees not only customers, but patterns. The room is his livelihood, but also his weather. If the mood darkens, his day darkens. If laughter comes easily, he feels the profit in more than money. Perhaps he once imagined another life. Perhaps he inherited the place. Perhaps he worked under another keeper before taking it over. Perhaps he came from elsewhere and built his reputation one cup at a time. The script does not need to decide. It is enough to notice that he is both central and overlooked, as hosts often are. A patron praises the coffee. The keeper accepts without too much expression. Praise too eagerly received can invite teasing, but he is pleased. A well-made cup is a small defence against the day's uncertainty. Outside the door, the city shifts toward evening. More men will come when work loosens its hold. The coffeehouse will fill again. The keeper begins preparing for the second life of the day. Before evening gathers inside, let us step outside for a while and follow the streets that feed the room. Although our day remains centred on the coffeehouse, the smell of coffee does not end at its door. One of the risks of telling history through a single room is that the room begins to seem like the whole world. But every coffeehouse was surrounded by households, courtyards, kitchens, shops, religious spaces, and family networks. Coffee moved through many of these places. It was bought and sold in public, prepared in homes, offered to guests, remembered in songs and sayings, and eventually treated as part of a cultural inheritance much larger than any one establishment. In a household, coffee could carry a different kind of intimacy. A guest might be welcomed with a small cup prepared carefully. The act of serving could express respect, affection, status, or ceremony. The cup might be presented in a way that reflected the household's means and customs. The conversation around it might be quieter than in a coffee house, shaped by kinship, gender, age, and domestic etiquette. In such a setting, coffee did not create a public circle of men, but a private or semi-private moment of hospitality. Women, who were generally not patrons of the male coffee house as we were imagining it, were not absent from coffee culture. Their relationship to coffee often belonged to domestic and social settings, visits, ceremonies, household gatherings, and the work of preparation and service. Historical details varied widely by class, region, century, and community, so it is best to avoid speaking too broadly. But it is important to remember that the public coffee house was only one visible branch of a larger coffee world. Coffee also entered language. A culture does not truly adopt a drink until it can joke about it, praise it, complain about it, and use it as a symbol. Over time, Turkish coffee became associated with hospitality, memory, conversation, and ceremony. It appears in literature, songs, proverbs, and everyday expressions. A small cup could suggest welcome. A bitter taste could suggest sincerity, endurance, or the seriousness of an occasion. The grounds at the bottom of the cup could invite playful interpretation. A routine became a reservoir of meaning. Back in our coffee house, the keeper may not think about such meanings. He is concerned with whether the next pot is ready, yet his work participates in them. Every cup he serves helps maintain the wider habit. Every patron who leaves satisfied carries the taste elsewhere, perhaps home, perhaps to another district, perhaps into a story told later. Coffee also connected Istanbul to distant labour and landscapes. The beans did not grow beside the coffee house door. Their journey required agriculture, trade, shipping, taxation, storage, and sale. In the cup, those distances disappear. The drink seems local because it is served by a familiar hand in a familiar room. But coffee is both intimate and far-travelled. It allows the ordinary man sitting on a cushion in Istanbul to taste something that began beyond his horizon. This far-travelled quality may be part of coffee's quiet magic. It belongs to the local room while reminding us that no city is only itself. Istanbul especially was a city of roots. Goods entered by sea and land. People arrived with accents, skills, beliefs, memories, and appetites. A cup of coffee held more than warmth. It held the city's ability to receive the world and make it part of daily routine. The coffee house, then, is not separate from domestic life, trade, ceremony, or empire. It is a meeting point where all those larger systems become small enough to hold. A man lifts a cup and tastes it. He may think only that it is good, or too bitter, or not hot enough. But around that simple judgment are forests of human labour and habit. Someone grew the beans, someone transported them, someone sold them, someone roasted and ground them, someone carried water, someone lit the fire, someone washed the cup, someone made the room socially safe enough for him to sit there and complain about the taste. History is generous in this way. It lets us find the world inside a small act. The keeper brings another tray through the room. The cups are small, the gestures familiar. Outside, households prepare their own evenings. Somewhere another cup is being served in a private room. Somewhere a woman receives a guest. Somewhere a family discusses a matter too delicate for the street. Somewhere coffee is part of welcome, worry, ceremony, or rest. Inside the coffee house, the public version continues. The day moves toward evening and the lamps wait. The coffee house opens onto a city that never belongs to one story. Step out from the warmth of the room and the first thing you notice is the change in air. Inside, the scent is coffee, smoke, wool, wood, breath, and old conversation. Outside, the air is larger. It carries salt from the water, spice from a shop, damp stone from a shaded lane, animal sweat, bread, fruit, leather, and the sharp note of metal being worked somewhere nearby. The afternoon street is a moving text. A man with a tray passes carefully, balancing small items that would be easy to break. A porter bends under a load tied so skillfully it seems almost part of his back. A shopkeeper calls to a customer with practiced warmth. A child is scolded for standing where a cart must pass. A cat sleeps in a place that should be inconvenient but somehow is not. Above, shutters open and close, laundry stirs. A face appears briefly and disappears. Not far away, the bizarre world thickens. Ottoman markets were not merely places of buying and selling. They were systems of trust, regulation, reputation, craft, supply, and daily encounter. Goods had histories. Cloth might have passed through several hands before being measured for a customer. Spices carried the memory of distance. Metal tools held the skill of workshops. Coffee itself, before reaching the cup, belonged to this world of purchase, transport, storage, and preparation. A coffee house near commerce absorbs commercial time. Men come before a negotiation, after a delivery, while waiting for someone, or because the outcome of a transaction is uncertain, and sitting in the coffee house is more dignified than pacing in the street. A buyer and seller might not conduct all business there, but a conversation over coffee can soften bargaining or make refusal less abrupt. The room provides witnesses without requiring formal proceedings. Down toward the water, the city changes again. Istanbul's waterways were among its great shaping forces. The Bosporus, the Golden Horn, and the Sea of Marmara tied the city to local crossings and long-distance routes. Boats carried people, wood, food, messages, fish, goods, and rumour. A man who spent his morning near the docks could bring into the coffee house a world larger than the room, the mood of sailors, the delay of cargo, the condition of weather beyond the city, the arrival of travellers. Stand for a moment near the quay. Listen to rope, water, gulls, feet on planks, the creak of wood, the call of someone steadying a load. The water makes the city restless. Even when a man sits still in a coffee house, he is in a city built on movement. Return from the water toward the lanes. Pass a public fountain. Someone pauses to drink or fill a vessel. Public water structures were more than useful architecture. They were part of the city's moral and social landscape. To provide water could be an act of piety, status, charity, and civic presence. The coffee house depends on such networks. The cup of coffee is connected quietly to fountains, carriers, and the wider system by which water reaches human hands. Nearby, a mosque courtyard gathers another rhythm. Men pass in and out. The city's day is marked by prayer, but not everyone moves identically, and daily life continues around religious time in practical ways. A man may leave the coffee house for prayer and return after. Another may pass by without stopping, bound for work. The courtyard, like the coffee house, is a place where bodies and time are organised, though toward a different purpose. This is important for the script's atmosphere. The coffee house should not be isolated from the moral and spiritual world of Ottoman life, but neither should it be confused with it. It is adjacent to many rhythms. It borrows from them and interrupts them. It sits in the same city as mosques, churches, synagogues, markets, homes, courts, schools, bathhouses, workshops, and cemeteries. The coffee house is one instrument in a larger orchestra. As afternoon light lowers, the street becomes more textured. Dust catches gold. A worker's face shows fatigue more clearly. A shopkeeper's voice has lost some of its morning brightness. Children who were noisy earlier now move in smaller groups. Somewhere a meal is being prepared. The smell slips into the lane and is gone. A man carrying news walks faster than those carrying goods. At the coffeehouse door, the boundary between inside and outside remains porous. Patrons inside see feet pass, hear voices, and recognize men by sound before sight. Passers-by glimpse the room. Cups, cushions, smoke, a bowed head, a raised hand, the flash of a game piece. Some look in with intention. Others glance only because human beings are drawn to lit interiors. A young man stops at the threshold but does not enter. Perhaps he's looking for someone. Perhaps he's been told not to linger. Perhaps he lacks the coin. Perhaps he's not yet confident enough. The keeper sees him, but does not call out. Public rooms have their own forms of mercy. Not every hesitation needs to be exposed. An older patron leaves, blinking at the change in light. He stands outside a moment as if remembering why he came into the street. Then he turns toward the market. Behind him, another man enters. The coffeehouse loses and gains a person in the same breath. This is the room's relation to the city. It receives, holds, and releases. It is never finished. From outside, the coffeehouse sounds different. Inside, one hears the separate voices. Outside, they blend into a low human warmth. The clink of cups becomes occasional. Laughter becomes a soft burst. The storyteller's earlier performance has left traces. Someone repeats a phrase near the doorway and receives a reply from within. The sun lowers further. Shadows lengthen under awnings. The air cools slightly near the water, though stone still holds the day's warmth. Men begin to finish work or shift toward evening obligations. Some will go home, some will stop for one cup first, some will tell themselves one cup and remain longer. The coffeehouse waits for them with its door open, its fire alive, and its keeper measuring the coming evening by the sound of steps. Soon the lamps will be lit. Evening enters the coffeehouse by degrees. First, the light at the doorway changes. It becomes less white, more golden, then more grey. The corners of the room deepen. The faces of men sitting farthest from the entrance lose detail. The smoke near the ceiling becomes visible in layers. The keeper notices before anyone asks. He reaches for the lamps. A lamp being lit is one of the oldest forms of comfort. The flame is small, but it changes the room's sense of itself. It says the day has not ended. It has become interior. Outside, the street may cool and darken, but inside, the coffeehouse can continue under a warmer, more human light. One lamp is lit, then another. Their glow touches cups, brows, hands, and the edges of the game board. Shadows gather behind shoulders. The room grows both more crowded and more intimate. In daylight, the coffeehouse belongs partly to the street. At night, it belongs more to itself. Evening brings men who could not come earlier. Workers released from tasks. Merchants finished with accounts. A man who promised his household he would not be long. Another who made no such promise. A traveller looking for company before sleeping in a lodging house. A storyteller returning, or a different performer arriving. Men who have spent the day speaking professionally now speak lazily. Men who have spent the day silent now have words to spend. The keeper's work quickens. Evening is profitable if managed well. Cups move in greater number. The fire is watched carefully. A helper, if present, carries water, clears cups, adjusts seating, and learns how quickly a room can become demanding without seeming disorderly. The tray travels from hand to hand, from hearth to table, from table to washing, from washing back to service. The atmosphere becomes layered. Near the door, practical talk continues. Who owes what, whether a shop will open tomorrow, whether a certain official has changed a rule, whether a road is safe after rain. Near the back, men discuss poetry, or at least lines they admire. At the game board, competition grows louder because losing in the evening feels more public. Near the wall, the quiet man remains, now lit from one side by a lamp that makes him look older than he did in daylight. This is the hour when a crowded room can feel most lonely, not because anyone is cruel, and not because the mood is sad. It is lonely in the way evening often is lonely. The day has spent its energy. Men return to themselves even while talking. A laugh rises and fades, and after it fades, each person remembers the private weight he carried in. A traveller hears a familiar word in an unfamiliar accent and thinks of home. An older man watches younger men argue over a game and remembers when his own voice was louder. The keeper counts cups and notices the empty place of a patron who has not come for several nights. The coffee house holds these private thoughts without asking to see them. This is one reason its atmosphere is so rich for a sleep story. It is not merely cheerful. It is not merely noisy. It is a room where public warmth and private solitude coexist. Men sit close together. Their knees may nearly touch. Their voices mingle. Yet each life remains separate, like cups on the same tray. A man near the centre asks for a story. Another asks for music. A third says music will ruin the game. The keeper says nothing. He has learned that many disputes dissolve if not given a clear surface to strike. The storyteller, if present, lets the men ask twice before agreeing. Performers understand the value of being wanted. Perhaps tonight there is no full performance, only fragments. A comic exchange between two men pretending to be wiser than they are. A recited couplet about the moon. A remembered line from a famous tale. A brief imitation of a pompous official, softened enough not to be dangerous. Coffeehouse humour could be sharp, and some historical performances carried social or political satire. But our evening keeps the edge gentle. The room wants pleasure, not trouble. The lamps flicker. Outside the door the street is darker. Passers-by are fewer now, and each one seems more distinct. A late arrival brings cold air with him. Men complain theatrically. He apologises without meaning it. He orders coffee. In many early modern cities, coffee and artificial light helped extend sociability into later hours. It would be too simple to say coffee created nightlife, because people had gathered at night before coffee and in many forms. But coffee houses certainly gave wakefulness a public room. The combination of warm drink, lamps, stories, games, and company made the evening feel usable. Night was not only for sleep, work, prayer, or danger. It could also be for lingering. The young apprentice, still present beyond the hour he expected, looks toward the door with a flicker of worry. He should perhaps return. But the room has become difficult to leave. Evening coffee houses were skilled at this. A man stays for the end of a story, then for the next game, then for a friend's arrival, then because leaving now would seem foolish after staying so long. Time slips from one cup to the next. The keeper sees the apprentice's glance and says nothing. He was young once, or at least we may imagine he was. Every generation learns the cost of lingering. A cup is placed before the traveller. He thanks the keeper. The men near him are speaking of places he does not know, but the rhythm of their speech has become soothing. He does not need to understand every reference. He understands the shape of the room, light, heat, voices, the small dignity of being served. The older regular by the door has grown quiet. He watches the street more than the room. Perhaps he's waiting for someone who will not come. Perhaps he simply likes to be near the threshold when night arrives. Doorways are good places for people who want to belong and leave at the same time. The game ends with a shout, then laughter, then accusation, then reconciliation. Another begins. The coffee house does not move toward a climax. It moves in circles. This is good for sleep. A day in such a room does not need a dramatic peak. Its meaning is in recurrence. The fire fed, the cups filled, the stories told, the door opening and closing, the city entering and leaving. Evening deepens. A final storyteller's fragment drifts over the room. It's about a man who searched the city for wisdom and found it only when he stopped asking impressive questions and listened to an old coffee house keeper explain how to pour without spilling. The men laugh because they expect a better ending. The storyteller says that is the ending. Wisdom, he tells them, is often disappointing to those who want it decorated. The keeper, accused by implication of wisdom, refuses to react. This makes the story better. The lamps burn steadily. The coffee house has become a small island of light in the darkening city. And now, slowly, night begins to ask for its room back. When evening has settled fully, the coffee house becomes a better place for shadows. The lamps do not chase darkness away completely. They arrange it. They leave corners soft, walls uneven, faces half-lit, and gestures larger than they would be in daylight. This is the hour when performance feels natural. A man speaking in the morning is only a man speaking. A man speaking by lamplight can become several people at once. Ottoman urban entertainment included many forms, and not all belonged to every coffee house. There were storytellers, reciters, musicians, comic performers, and, in some settings, shadow plays associated with figures such as Karagos and Hasivat. These shadow plays are often remembered for humour, wordplay, social observation, and lively characters. They could be satirical, and in some historical contexts they commented on public life in ways that were more pointed than our gentle script needs to explore. For tonight, we can imagine only the softer edge of that tradition, the screen, the lamp behind it, the figures moving as silhouettes, and the audience leaning toward the play of light. Perhaps our coffee house does not host a full shadow play tonight. Perhaps the room is too small, or the performer is elsewhere, or the keeper prefers a storyteller who needs fewer arrangements. But one of the patrons mentions a performance he saw in another district. He describes the white screen glowing like a small moon, the puppets appearing flat and alive at once, the clever voice of Karagos, the more polished speech of Hasivat, and the way the audience laughed before the joke had fully arrived because they knew the pattern and loved it. The men listen. Some have seen such performances many times. Others know only fragments. The traveller has heard of them, but not in this city. The apprentice wishes aloud that such a play would be shown here. The keeper says the room would become too crowded, though his tone suggests he is not entirely opposed to profit. A storyteller takes the mention as an opportunity. Without a screen or puppets, he imitates the rhythm of a shadow play, not copying any exact performance, but borrowing the feeling of two mismatched voices. One voice is grand, careful, and full of phrases meant to impress. The other is plain, literal, and impossible to manage. The room understands immediately. The humour lies in contrast. Refinement meeting bluntness, education meeting common sense, social ambition meeting the stubborn earth. This kind of humour gave coffeehouse audiences a way to laugh at themselves and at the world around them. A boastful man could be mocked without naming him. A pompous official could be suggested without being drawn too clearly. A greedy merchant, a foolish scholar, a sly servant, a naive newcomer, a sharp-tongued neighbour. All could appear in performance as types, softened by exaggeration. Laughter made social criticism easier to swallow, though not always safer. In our gentle version, the storyteller keeps the satire light. He tells of a man who enters a coffee house determined to prove he is cultured. He uses long words for simple things. He calls the cup a vessel of philosophical darkness. He calls the foam an airy crown. He calls the tray a mobile constellation. The plain-spoken character asks whether he wants coffee or a lecture. The room laughs because everyone has known someone who decorates ordinary life until it becomes difficult to use. The storyteller shifts voice, posture, and expression. He becomes the decorated man, then the plain man, then the keeper, then an impatient patron. The audience follows without needing costumes. Imagination supplies what the room lacks. This is the great economy of oral performance. A single body can furnish a city if the listeners agree to see it. The lamps flicker as if participating. Shadows move on the walls. Men who spent the day negotiating, carrying, counting, writing or waiting now allow themselves to be carried by a voice. The coffee house becomes less a business and more a shared dream, though everyone remains awake. For a sleep narration, this is a useful thought. Listening can be a form of rest. The men are not silent because they are bored. They are silent because someone else is holding the thread. In daily life, each person must carry his own thread. Work, money, family, reputation, memory, worry. During a story, the thread is held in common. The listener can loosen his grip. The performance ends with a small moral, or perhaps with no moral at all. The decorated man finally drinks his coffee and burns his tongue because he was too busy praising it to notice the steam. The plain man says that wisdom begins when the mouth waits for the cup to cool. This is not profound, but the room treats it as profound enough for evening. The laughter is softer now than it was earlier. Night laughter is different. It knows the day is almost spent. Afterward, conversation returns in pieces. One man repeats the phrase about the mobile constellation. Another says he will use it next time he carries a tray. The keeper says that if anyone calls his tray a constellation, the stars will cost extra. This receives approval. Such small echoes are how performances survive. Not every story is remembered whole. Often a single line remains, travelling from room to room, changing slightly each time. A phrase heard tonight may appear tomorrow in a workshop, then in a market, then in another coffee house where no one knows its origin. Oral culture does not always preserve ownership. It preserves usefulness. The lamps continue to burn. Outside, the city is darker now. The coffeehouse's voices have become an interior weather, warm, shifting, low. Night has gathered, but it has not yet ended. Before the last patrons leave, it is worth asking what the coffeehouse itself would remember if rooms could remember in words. It would remember entrances first, the hesitant step of the newcomer, the confident stride of the regular, the heavy arrival of the porter, the theatrical entrance of the man who always wants to be noticed, the quiet appearance of someone who hopes not to be asked too many questions. The doorway would remember them all because every visit begins with a crossing. It would remember voices, not the exact content of every conversation, but their textures, the low murmur of practical men, the sharp rhythm of bargaining, the rounded phrases of someone educated and pleased by his own speech, the quick laughter of youth, the tired answer of age, the storyteller's changing tones, the keeper's steady replies. A room that hears voices all day must come to know the difference between anger, excitement, performance, sorrow, and ordinary complaint. It would remember hands placing coins on a tray, hands cupping warmth, hands moving game pieces, hands smoothing a beard before making a point, hands gesturing in the air to show the size of a fish, the height of a wave, the foolishness of another man's idea. Hands are among the most honest parts of conversation. They continue speaking when words become careful. It would remember waiting. This, perhaps, most of all. The coffee house is a place of waiting disguised as leisure. Men wait for friends, news, work, payment, evening, courage, better weather, a chance to speak, a chance to leave. The room gives waiting a shape. Without the coffee house, a man waiting might stand in the street and feel exposed. Inside, he can sit with a cup and seem intentional. It would remember repetitions, the same jokes returning, the same complaint about coffee being better in another place, the same disagreement over a game rule, the same old story requested by men who claim they have forgotten it. Repetition can be dull when forced, but comforting when chosen. A familiar phrase tells people they have returned to a world that still recognizes them. It would remember absences too. Rooms know when a regular stops coming. At first, the absence may be explained easily. Work, illness, travel, family obligations, debt, weather. Then it becomes a question. Then, perhaps, a fact. Historical records often preserve names through taxes, courts, property, appointments, and disputes. But everyday absence is preserved more softly, in the glance toward a usual seat, in the keeper making one cup fewer without saying why. The coffee house would remember change, though slowly. A new keeper, a repaired shutter, a different supplier, a fashion in clothing, a new kind of pipe, a shift in the stories people prefer, a district becoming busier or poorer, regulations tightening or loosening, a generation of young men becoming old regulars, a bench replaced after years of use. Social institutions can seem timeless from within, but they are always changing in small increments. It would remember misunderstanding, strangers who didn't know the customs, young men who spoke too loudly, visitors who misread silence as coldness or friendliness as invitation, men from different backgrounds who use the same word differently. Coffee houses were places of sociability, but sociability is a skill. It requires reading the room, and not everyone reads at the same speed. It would remember kindnesses that look like nothing, a cup served on credit, a seat made available, a joke redirected before it wounded, a story chosen because the room needed laughter more than argument, a man quietly told that his friend had arrived, a traveller given directions, a young apprentice spared public embarrassment. Much of human decency survives by staying small. It would remember bitterness too, because coffee is bitter, and people are not always gentle. There may have been insults, jealousies, unfair jokes, debts unpaid, rumours repeated without care, arguments that lingered. To make the coffee house only cosy would be false, but to make it only suspicious or disorderly would also be false. Like most human places, it held a mixture, and perhaps if the room could remember one thing most clearly, it would remember the transformation of solitude into company. Not complete company, not the intimate belonging of family, nor the formal belonging of office or guild, but the lighter belonging of shared presence. Men came in with separate lives and sat under one roof. They did not become the same. They did not need to. The coffee house gave them a common hour. This is why a day in such a place can still speak to us. Modern rooms are different. Modern coffee is different. The technologies of news, work and light are different. But the need for a place between obligation and isolation remains recognizable. People still seek rooms where they can be near others without explaining everything. They still hold warm cups in uncertain hours. They still listen for stories to carry them out of themselves for a while. The Ottoman Coffeehouse belongs to its own time and should not be turned into a modern cafe and costume. Yet its human elements are close enough to feel: warmth, bitterness, talk, waiting, performance, fatigue, return. The room remembers all of these, even as night lowers around it. Now the final departures can begin. No one announces the end of the evening. It begins when departures become more frequent than arrivals. One man stands, stretches, pays, and steps into the night. Another follows after a few minutes. A game ends and is not restarted. A story is requested and postponed until tomorrow. The cups still move, but more slowly. The room's sound lowers without quite becoming quiet. The keeper knows this hour well. It is the hour of last cups, unfinished thoughts, and small promises. A man says he will return early tomorrow. Another says he will bring someone who knows the rest of the story. A third insists that tonight's game proved nothing, and that justice requires another match soon. The keeper has heard these phrases before. He accepts them as part of closing. The last cups taste different, even if prepared the same way. Morning coffee wakes the day. Afternoon coffee holds the room in place. evening coffee extends company. The last cup gathers all of that and adds farewell. It is held a little longer. It is sipped with less talk. The grounds settle in a cup that may not be red, but seems full of signs anyway. Outside, the lane is cooler. The water in the distance is invisible now, but still present in sound and smell. Lamps glow behind other shutters. A dog barks far away. Footsteps pass and fade. The city does not sleep all at once. Some people are still working, some are praying, some are returning home, some are beginning the part of their labour that belongs to night. But the coffeehouse's day is ending. The quiet man rises. His movement is so unhurried that for a moment no one notices. He places payment where it should go, or speaks softly to the keeper if there is an account between them. The keeper nods. The man steps outside. He does not look back, but he may return tomorrow. The room feels his absence only because he'd been there all day, saying little, making almost no claim on the space. Some presences are noticed most when they leave. The traveller also prepares to go. Someone gives him directions he did not ask for. Someone else corrects them. A third offers advice about a lodging place. The traveller thanks them all and will follow only part of what he has been told. He has spent one day in a room that is not his, and because of that, Istanbul will feel slightly less foreign when he wakes. The apprentice leaves too late and too quickly. The older men smile after him. They remember being late, or they remember pretending they were never late. The city teaches young men through embarrassment as much as instruction. The game board is closed. Pieces are gathered, counted, and put away. A missing piece causes a brief search and a mild accusation. It is found under a cushion. The accusation is withdrawn without apology, because the men are too tired for proper dignity. The storyteller, if he has remained, wraps his small belongings. His voice is ordinary now. This is always a little surprising. The man who filled the room with characters becomes simply a man fastening his cloak, discussing payment, and stepping into the street. Performance leaves no visible structure behind, only memory. The keeper begins the work of undoing the day. Cups are collected. Some still hold a ring of grounds at the bottom, dark and thick as silt. He rinses them, sets them aside, counts them without seeming to count. A cracked cup is examined and judged usable or not. Trays are wiped. Ash is shifted. Coals are managed so they die safely or remain banked as needed. Cushions are straightened. A stool is returned to its place. The floor will need sweeping again in the morning. The room after people leave is never the same as the room before they came. Morning emptiness is expectant. Night emptiness is full. It holds the after-image of bodies, where men sat, where they leaned, where they laughed, where one man waited, where a story turned the air soft, where a game became too important, where the keeper stood pouring cup after cup. The old regular near the door is one of the last to leave. He rises slowly. Perhaps his knees object. Perhaps he wants one more sentence before the day ends. He says something about the weather tomorrow. The keeper answers. The words are ordinary, but they carry the tenderness of routine. To speak of tomorrow at closing is to assume the world will return. When he has gone, only the keeper and perhaps a helper remain. The shutter is lowered part way, then fully. Wood meets wood. The street becomes separate. The coffeehouse turns inward one final time. The keeper checks the room. This is not dramatic, but it is careful. Fire, cups, money, door, water, tools. He knows where everything should be. He knows what must be done before sleep, before morning, before another day can begin. A public room is never truly finished. It is only prepared for its next use. For a moment, he stands still. Maybe he is tired. He's been surrounded by voices all day, yet much of his own day has passed in service rather than speech. He has heard jokes, complaints, news, stories, bargaining, praise, criticism, and silence. He's been host to loneliness, pride, appetite, boredom, curiosity, and friendship. Now, with the room empty, he hears the small sounds that were hidden under human presence. A coal shifting, wood settling, distant water, the muted city beyond the shutter. He may not think of the coffee house as history. To him, it is work. But history is often made of work that did not know it was being remembered. The last lamp is lowered or extinguished. The walls darken. The coffee house becomes a shape in the night, one warm room among many, holding its stories until morning. Now the coffee house rests, not in silence exactly. Old rooms are rarely silent. Wood answers the night with small sounds. Ash settles. Somewhere outside, a late footstep passes and disappears. The water beyond the streets continues its long movement, touching the city in darkness as it touched it at dawn. But compared with the day, the room is quiet enough to seem thoughtful. A day has passed through it. In the morning, the room was only a possibility. Swept floor, waiting cups, pale light, the keeper's hands preparing heat and water. Then came the first guest, the first cup, the first ordinary words. Artisans entered with the marks of work on their hands. A porter rested his shoulders. A traveller brought distance into the room. A young apprentice learned how men perform ease. An old regular watched the street. A quiet man sat among voices and asked almost nothing of them. News came and changed shape. Rumour became conversation. Conversation became laughter. A game began and made small fortunes out of dice and pieces. A storyteller arrived and turned the coffee house into a theatre without curtains. The keeper held the room together with coffee, memory, patience, and accounts. The city outside offered water, markets, boats, prayers, shadows, errands, and dust. Evening lamps gathered the room into warmth. Last cups were poured. Men left in ones and twos, carrying fragments of the day into the night. None of this is spectacular in the usual sense. And yet ordinary life is the deep substance of history. Empires are not only made of decrees and campaigns, buildings and ceremonies, they're also made of rooms where people sit, complain about prices, wait for friends, listen to stories, and drink something bitter from a small cup. They're made of repeated gestures, lifting a shutter, stirring coals, pouring carefully, greeting a regular, making room on a bench, laughing at the same joke once more. An Ottoman coffeehouse was not the same everywhere or in every century. Some were modest, some famous, some respectable, some suspect, some literary, some rough, some tied to particular trades or groups. They changed over time, and historians continue to study their many roles in social life, leisure, public conversation, entertainment, and urban culture. But the imagined day we have followed is built from patterns that many sources make plausible. Coffee prepared carefully, men gathering outside the home, news moving by voice, games passing the hours, storytellers holding attention, and a room becoming meaningful because people returned to it. There is something moving about a place that exists for temporary belonging. No one sleeps in the coffee house tonight. No family gathers there around a private hearth. No one owns the bench by right of blood. And yet for the length of a day, people belonged there. They were known by their cups, their jokes, their debts, their silences, their preferred seats, their stories. They came alone and became part of a room. They left alone and carried the room with them. At the bottom of the last cup the grounds have settled. If someone were to turn that cup and read the dark shapes, perhaps he would see not a prophecy, but the outline of the day itself. A narrow street, a door, a flame, a traveller, a game board, a storyteller's raised hand, a quiet man in the corner, a keeper wiping a tray, a lamp burning low, a city of water and stone breathing beyond the shutter. History often asks us to look upward, toward monuments and rulers, but sometimes it asks us to lower our eyes to the cup, the threshold, the worn cushion, the hand that pours, the listener who says nothing. There, in small things, the past becomes close enough to hear. The coffee house is dark now. The keeper has gone. The street has softened. The lamps in nearby windows are fewer. Over the water, the night air moves gently against the city. Tomorrow the shutter may rise again. The broom may cross the floor. The coals may glow. The first guest may enter and the old rhythm may begin once more, but tonight the room can rest. The city can rest. And you can rest too. Good night.
Thank you for watching Something About Sleep. Since you're clearly still awake, why don't you click on the next video and we'll see you there.